This is Laurie Forster, the wine coach with the sipping point. And given that St. Patrick's Day is coming up here very soon, we're going to take a little break on the wine. And I'm thrilled to have with me Tim Herlihy from Tullamore D.E.W whiskey in Ireland. But he's not in Ireland. He's actually in Miami on a tour of the Irish pubs of America. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Delighted to be here. I guess we're going to have to call this the Irish wine segment, are we?
Yes, I'm happy. Yeah, we can call this Irish wine. Well, yeah. Okay, people always love to hear my story about how I got to be in the wine business. I used to be in sales, taking clients out to dinner, and always felt a little uncomfortable ordering the wine. And when I started studying so I could do that better, I fell in love with wine, quit my six-figure software job, and moved into my passion. So how do you are the brand ambassador in the U.S. for Tullamore D.E.W. How did you get that job?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you'll get a theme out of this story. It's being really lucky. And I think everyone has an unusual way into this. Like nobody goes to brand ambassador college or university. They kind of find their way in. And I made the kind of unusual move from being an egg farmer in Ireland to, the natural transition from egg.
I love it.
You may be questioning Tullamore D.E.W's recruitment policy at the moment, but I assure you, they only hired the best egg farmers. So
love it.
Myself and my dad, we had an egg farm. My dad still does 80,000 hens, and we were building an egg empire together. And I started off my whiskey career with a distillery called the Cooley Distillery. And I'd done a year with them, loved it. But my dad was expanding the egg farm and he asked me to come back and help build the egg empire. And I had every intention of doing that, staying on. But I got the call from Tullamore D.E.W. William Grant had bought Tully. And they were like, we need a guy from the US. You kind of fit the bill. Would you come over? And it was something I couldn't refuse to do. So I've been 4.5 years as Tullamore D.E.W ambassador in the US, going city to city, coast to coast, and all in between, always with a bottle of Tullamore D.E.W in hand. But still a big fan of eggs. So I think my perfect universe is a Tullamore D.E.W whiskey sour, egg white whiskey sour. So yeah,
that's great. I thought you were going to say Tullamore D.E.W with scrambled eggs for breakfast.
Well, the Irish breakfast, yeah, that's ideal as well. We'll make that work too. And no better drink to have with your Irish breakfast than an Irish coffee as well. So
yes,
it's a good start to the day. It's a good start.
So you're on a tour right now that I'm super jealous about in leading up to St. Patrick's Day. So tell me what you're doing.
So on February 17th, we nickname it St. Practice Day for those who can't wait 30 days to enjoy St. Patrick's Day. So I started off in LA's oldest Irish pub called Tom Bergen's, and that started a 50-state, 50 Irish pub in 30 days tour in search for the best Irish pubs, the true characters that make them so special, but also the best and weird and wonderful places to celebrate St. Patrick's Day in America. And today's day 20. It is state number 43. I'm in Miami, Florida at the moment. And we're just 10 days away from St. Patrick's Day. So there's been a lot of cool stories, adventures along the way. I've been to everything like Charlotte, North Carolina. They're the home of the world's biggest pub crawl, 21,000 people. It takes place on St. Patrick's Day in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been to the site of the world's shortest St. Patrick's Day parade in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I know 30,000 people attend this parade. It's just 98 feet. And this year, Kevin Bacon is going to be the Grand Marshal of the Hot Springs St. Patrick's Day parade in Arkansas. So
wow, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. That's pretty amazing. So if folks want to follow along on your journey after they listen to this podcast or watch the video chat, how can they find out about these adventures and where you are?
Yeah, the best place is on Twitter or Instagram at Tullamore Tim. And I'd love if people would come along, join me at some of the pubs along the way. We can raise a glass, share a toast, and I can tell all the stories of this escapade across America. I can tell you 2 things from it. Number one, America is a big, big country. So far, out of 43 states, Tullamore Dew tastes equally as good in all 43 states.
Oh, that's good to know.
I'm doing my due diligence, I guess.
Absolutely. And are you filming any of this along the way?
Yeah, I'm doing my best to film it along the way, capture it. Like there's multiple photos for each state, and you can see that on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Great.
So it's been good. There's been some brilliant pubs. Some I've been to, some I've always wanted to go to, and it's been a fun tour. So next stop is Fido in Miami, and
great.
I just came from Providence, Rhode Island there last night. So
and have you already been to Maryland? Did I miss you?
So I went to Baltimore. I went to Patrick's on Pratt Street, which is America's oldest Irish pub.
Yes, I know. We have some great Irish pubs, and I think I was out of town, so we missed actually being in person. But, we've been talking about sort of what you've been doing and how you got into it. But I have in front of me 3 glasses with 3 of the different whiskeys that you produce. So tell me a little bit about what you think makes your product so different than the others on the market.
Yeah, and well, talking about Irish whiskey specifically, Irish whiskey is known for being triple distilled. Now, I like to bust that myth straight away. You don't need to be a triple distilled whiskey to be an Irish whiskey. And in Ireland, we have 3 different styles of whiskey. We have grain whiskey made from corn, column distilled, a little bit of barley in there, or malted barley for enzymes. That's a very light, delicate, sweet style of whiskey. Second type is single malt, and I'm sure your listeners and viewers are well familiar with single malt.
Right.
In Ireland, we do have one peated malt. It's called Connemara, but outside of that, the rest are unpeated. So they're very fruity, very fresh, very bright style of single malt. Lots of citrus.
Right.
So that's our second type. And then our third type, which is really unique to the island of Ireland, is a whiskey style called pot still whiskey. With pot still whiskey, it's a mash bill of malted and unmalted barley. So germinated, ungerminated barley. And that actually dates back to when we were under British rule. We didn't really like being under British rule, but we really didn't like paying their taxes. And the British put a tax first on our still size. So all the crafty Irish distillers decided to make smaller stills and just run them more regularly. But what they wanted to do was basically the more whiskey you produce, the more tax you should pay. So they decided to put a tax on malted barley, thinking, okay, the more malted barley you use, more whiskey you make, more tax revenue you should be paying. But we're a little bit crafty in Ireland, so we decided to come up with this new mash of malted and unmalted barley. And the good news was it avoided tax, but the sensational news was it created this new style of Irish whiskey, which is very creamy mouth texture. I don't like saying oily, but it gives you this butteriness, this wonderful mouth feel. And it also couples that with a bit of spice as well. So any of your viewers and listeners that have had Redbreast Irish whiskey or Green Spot, they're examples of single pot still whiskey.
Okay.
The nice thing about Tullamore Dew is it's made up of all 3 styles. So you have the grain, you have malt, and you have pot still whiskey. And out of the leading Irish whiskies, it's the only one to be made up of all 3. So it's quite unique in that way. I like to say it's all the good things about Irish whiskey in every glass and in every bottle. So nice. That's our whiskey aged in bourbon and sherry cask as well.
Okay, great. So let's talk about, I think I have is this a proper whiskey drinking glass?
That's a Glencairn glass, and it's way more proper than mine. I have a tumbler
in the hotel room. I love
it. I'm looking on at envy at your glorious Glencairn glass.
Yeah. So tell me, this is the basic. This is the basic whiskey. Tell me a little bit about how you would go. I know in wine, of course, we have our swirling and our sniffing and all kinds of things. Tell me how you would properly taste this, and let's talk about your basic whiskey.
Yeah, well, you've the perfect glass for nosing. So when I always nose my whiskey, I do it with my mouth open. And I know it can feel odd at times. You're nosing and you have your mouth open, but it opens up the airwaves. And a little bit different to wine is this swirling action actually agitates the alcohol. So we don't do that with whiskey. We'll kind of coat it, and that will kind of open up more aromatics, but swirling it kind of agitates it. So if you nose it, it's quite bright. You get a lot of citrus, you get a lot of fruits to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't want to agitate my whiskey ever. I want my whiskey to be very comfortable.
Very comfortable.
Yeah.
And then when you taste this up front, there's lots of honey vanilla up front. And that's the bourbon cask. You'll get that green apple, that citrus come through, and then that spice that we were talking about with the pot still whiskey.
Right.
That kind of kicks in on the center, center of your tongue there.
It's very smooth. I usually, I drink a lot of wine and spirits not as much, but this seems to me way smoother than a lot of the other whiskeys that I've tasted in the past.
Yeah, and that's classic. That's classic Irish whiskey.
Okay.
It's very true characteristic of Tullamore D.E.W. Irish whiskey, and I love that second sip on it as well. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, and it has the finish really stays with you for a long time.
Yeah. But I love that spice coming in. It's and a lot of people confuse that with alcohol, but actually that's the pot still spice coming in.
Okay.
And then you get a little bit of a sherry influence, and we'll taste more of the sherry influence on our 12-year-old, our bigger brother.
Okay.
But you get a little bit of that sherry coming in, and you get that nuttiness, almost dried fruits to it, but you definitely get that nuttiness coming in as well. But
so the bourbon barrels that you're using, I mean, the sherry barrels obviously are coming from Spain, but the bourbon barrels that you're using, where do you get those?
So we buy off multiple distilleries, and we buy off a broker. And the reason we do that is if we buy off one distillery, we're kind of buying the good, the bad, and the ugly. Whereas we find if we're buying off a pool of distilleries, we can then pick the best casks.
Okay.
So walking around our warehouses, you see them from Jim Beam, you see them from Wild Turkey, you see them from multiple distilleries that have no relation to each other, bar the fact that they're from Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And then our sherry casks, you may be well aware that there's not that much sherry being enjoyed at the moment, tragically.
Right.
So when it comes to whiskey, the demand for sherry casks far outstrips the supply that is used for sherry. So we have bodegas in Jerez and that are specifically there for whiskey cask development. So we'll go with our spec to season these casks, season them roughly for 2 years, and they're purely for the whiskey industry, those casks. And the sherry itself is, unfortunately, there's not that demand for the sherry. So it actually winds up being sherry vinaigrette. But I think we should, every time you have a whiskey, you should have a bit of sherry as well, just to keep the demand of sherry high, and that we can have more sherry casks for our whiskey. So
okay, I'll get my listeners to to help deliver on that challenge. So
and at the moment, this is Oloroso sherry cask.
Okay.
Although we may start experimenting in the future with maybe some Fino, some Pedro Jimenez as well. But what you're tasting now is Oloroso sherry cask.
Okay, great. Is there any kind of have you visited any of the distilleries, the bourbon distilleries, where you're using their barrels?
I have, and I'm actually back in Kentucky in May, and I've been to Buffalo Trace, I've been to Jim Beam, I've been to Evan Williams, whereas I'm going to go to Maker's Mark, and I'm really excited to go to Independent Stave Company.
Right.
And they're the cooperage before the Kentucky distillers get their hands on the cask. So I'm really interested in seeing, how they char and toast their barrels, and even just the the production of barrels. Whereas in Ireland, we get to see our cooperage, they're building and breaking down existing barrels. Whereas I'm looking to see I suppose, the beginning of it all, the beginning of the journey. So.
Absolutely. All right. So we tasted the Tullamore D.E.W basic. Now, next to that, I have a sample of your 12-year-old. So more aging in these barrels that we've been talking about. Yeah, that's it. And tell me a little bit about how this is going to change with the aging in barrel.
Yeah, and we're tasting two things. We're tasting the magic of maturation by it being aged for a minimum of 12 years old, and still to this day that fascinates me. Like, I don't know if you can remember what you were doing 12 years ago. I certainly can't. But we're probably not even going to take 12 seconds to drink this, which is quite interesting in itself. But we're tasting the magic of maturation, number one. And the angel share is something that crops up in whiskey distilleries, be it in Ireland, Scotland, America. And every year we lose roughly 2.5% due to this evaporation process. And leaving the cask there to interact with the oak, expand, contract, breed with it throughout the changes in temperatures throughout the year. We actually have so many casks laid down. I got my abacus out one day, and we figured out that we were losing over 2,000 bottles of Tullamore D.E.W a day. Because we have so many aging in the warehouse. That's a lot of greedy angels, a lot of evaporation. But what it does is...
Karma. It's good karma.
It's good karma. And what it does is it allows it to take on more characteristics from the oak, whether that oak has held bourbon previously or if it's held sherry. And the second part to this liquid story is, compared to the original that we tried, this is more malt whiskey, this is more pot still whiskey, and this has a higher sherry cask influence to it as well. And you're really going to taste that side by side when you're tasting it too. So I'm going to pour here.
Oh, wow. Fuller body feeling for sure. And that creaminess is really...
Yeah. And I think that spice with the sherry notes really kick in here. More so than the original. You get that original kind of feel up front.
Right.
Vanilla, but more creaminess to it. A little bit of citrus, but I feel the finish is characterized, dominated by that combination of spice, that dried fruits, and that almost deep red wine influence to it as well. And the finish sticks around a lot longer.
And I know in the wine world, the longer finish typically tells you it's a more complex wine, it's a higher quality wine, well made, not always more expensive, but definitely well made. And is that the same for whiskey?
Depends on the makeup of your whiskey. I think with any whiskey that uses pot still whiskey, you're going to get a longer finish to it, because that's what the spice component is. So the more pot still whiskey you have in there, the longer the finish is going to be.
Okay.
And I do want to point out one thing on pot still whiskey, because in Ireland it's difficult. We have two different definitions for pot still whiskey. A lot of people can confuse pot still whiskey with the copper pot stills that we use to distill our whiskey. But in Ireland, we specifically mean that mash of malted and unmalted barley. That happens to be distilled in copper pot stills as well. So it can be a while to wrap your head around that one. But when I say pot still whiskey, it's specifically about that mash bill of malted and unmalted barley. And I'm very happy that in Tullamore, at our new distillery, by the way, we've opened a new distillery 2 years now, right in the centre of Ireland. Tullamore is bang in the middle, an hour and 15 minutes outside of Dublin, and we get our name from, yes, the town of Tullamore, but the D.E.W in Tullamore D.E.W it's not the moisture in the grass in a wet morning. Named after this gentleman here, and I don't know if you can see. His name is Daniel Edmund Williams, and he went to work at the old Tullamore Distillery at the age of 14. We no longer hire 14-year-olds. You'd be very happy to hear. 16, they're far more productive at 16. No, but seriously, he started there at the age of 14. By the age of 25, he became a head distiller, general manager, and was a bit of an entrepreneur. He went about setting up a chain of 26 grocery stores, grain merchants, tea merchants. And moral of the story is he used all his money from those business enterprises to buy the Tullamore Distillery. When he did, he lent his initials to every bottle of whiskey we have. And that's where the June Tullamore D.E.W comes from.
Ah, perfect. I love that story. So a self-made man, and then, sort of poured his money into a passion for whiskey.
Exactly. An inspiration for all. But the 12-year-old is a fantastic whiskey, and I think it's one of the best bang for buck bottles of Irish whiskey you're going to get. Granted, my opinion is quite biased on that, but
yeah. What would these retail for, the basic versus the 12-year-old?
Yeah, so depending on where you shop, the original be $25 to $30, and then the 12-year-old would be about $50.
Okay, all right. And before we move on to our next one, since we're celebrating St. Patrick's Day and kind of gearing up for that, unfortunately, I'm not doing a tour for it, but I'm definitely excited. I got my green on for you. But what I hear that Americans are way more into this whole celebration than people are in Ireland. Is that true?
No, like in Ireland, it's a national holiday. Okay. So I think until America embraces it in I'm going to say official national holiday, I think Ireland's still leading the way on that one. It's different. So it's because it's a national holiday, all the kids are off school. A lot of people are off work as well. So it's very much starts off as a family day.
Right.
The thing to do is, start off with an Irish breakfast, probably pair it with an Irish coffee. Take the kids to the parade, and then later on in the afternoon, you'll wind up at your favorite local pub, and we'll continue the celebrations on into the evening. But Christmas and St. Patrick's Day are the two biggest holidays in Ireland, and it's very much our 4th of July. Now, it is not our Independence Day, but it has that significance in Ireland.
Great.
And I always like to point out a couple of things, because everyone associates St. Patrick's Day as a drinking holiday. In Ireland, you couldn't drink on St. Patrick's Day in a pub. Off licenses or liquor stores weren't open either.
Wow.
You couldn't drink in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day up until 1961.
Wow.
1962 was really a year to remember. But,
it was.
But even things like the parade, like the first ever St. Patrick's Day parade was in 1737 in Boston. It took Ireland roughly 200 years later to start celebrating being Irish and to start celebrating St. Patrick's Day with a parade. I think our first one was 1903 in Waterford, and then you had kind of nationally it was celebrated with a parade, probably 1930s. So we have a lot to thank our American cousins for celebrating St. Patrick's Day. You've kind of given us the inspiration celebrating being Irish. So it's still a big day in Ireland. Like, I got to tell you, every town, village has a St. Patrick's Day parade. So it's not just a thing that the big cities or towns do. It's everywhere. And it's a big community day. It's a big day for the pubs in Ireland. And it's one of my favorite days in the year.
Yeah, I hope to celebrate it there one day. So tell me a little bit about this third one. Is called the Trilogy. It sounds very elusive and mysterious, but what is going to make this third trilogy different?
So this is our newest release. It's also our oldest release to date. And this is a 15-year-old Tullamore D.E.W, which we call Trilogy. And whenever you think of Tullamore D.E.W, it's really about the power of three, because one, we triple distill. Two, we're made up of all three styles. of Irish whiskey. So I refer to that as being triple blend. And then to finish out the trifecta, we mature and finish this in 3 different types of casks. It's very unfortunate that it's 3 because Irish people struggle with their THs. So the 3 casks that we mature this in are bourbon and sherry, like we've previously tasted already. But we also do a 3-month rum cask finish as well. So Trinidadian rum cask, which really lends itself to a rummy raisin note. You also get that creaminess as well. A little bit behind you.
Wow. That really is creamy.
Very soft, buttery, creamy.
Yeah.
Instead of, you still get that pepperiness, not so much a spice that you have in the 12-year-old, but it's kind of more of a pepperiness on your lips.
Right.
Definitely on your tongue as well. But it's more creamy than spice for me on this.
And would butterscotch be like a weird, that's what I'm thinking, like a butterscotch?
No, you definitely have the butterscotch at play, toffee, caramel, again, honey and vanilla from the bourbon cask.
Mm-hmm.
less fruit forward, more dried fruits, if anything. I think raisin sings to me on this.
Okay. Yep.
But you don't have that citrus, you don't have that green apple that you do in the first 2 we tried. This is more dried fruits. Maybe a little bit of figs, raisin as well, sultanas too. But it's got a nice, very satisfying finish to it.
Yeah, and so we went from our 25 to our, I think you said 50 for the 12-year-old, and then what would the trilogy be?
75. Okay,
all right, great. So we have something for everyone here, and now we're tasting these, straight, I guess, if that's the right term. But what do you feel about making? I saw on the Tullamore D.E.W website there are cocktail recipes.
Yes.
Is it a sin to put some of these in a cocktail, or what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely not. In fact, it's unimaginative to not put them in a cocktail, and particularly with the original, anything from an Irish coffee to one of my favorite drinks, the Tipperary. It's a pre-prohibition drink. And it's one that I make on St. Patrick's Day because I always get asked to make green drinks. Uh-huh. So I reach for a green chartreuse, which is green in color. And I make a Tipperary, which is Tullamore D.E.W, green chartreuse, and vermouth as well. And it's a really enjoyable cocktail as well. But anything from, even if you want more of a simple serve, ginger ale works great. I actually love fresh pressed apple juice.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, ice and a Granny Smith apple juice. Just combine it with Tullamore D.E.W, and it really brings out that green apple flavor, but it also kind of pairs with that bitterness of the Granny Smith as well. And you almost feel like it's good for you at that point,
Oh, it's a health drink. It's a health drink for sure.
Irish coffees are brilliant too. It's an injection of personality. You have your 4 major food groups: alcohol, sugar, caffeine, and fat. It's all about balance.
What do you think?
But it's there's lots of drinks as well you can make.
So you're in Miami now. Where are you headed next?
So I'm doing 2 stops in Florida. I'm Miami, I'm Jacksonville, and then tomorrow I'm also going to be in St. Louis.
Okay.
I'm going to a pub that I've been wanting to go to for years called John McGurk's.
Okay.
It's continually recognized as being one of the best Irish pubs in the country. And then we have some great places coming up like Chicago, Boston, New York. I think there might be a couple of good pubs in those cities.
Oh, yes. I've lived in Chicago and New York before, and there's no shortage of amazing pubs there.
New Jersey, Connecticut. And one of the places I'm looking forward to going to is New London, Wisconsin.
Oh.
Now, they have the tradition on the 14th of March. They dress up in what I can only assume are very tasteful green leprechaun suits. And they change all the signs in New London from New London to New Dublin for the week of St. Patrick's Day. And it started off as a prank, but now the town council endorse it and take part in it. So,
perfect.
New Dublin, Wisconsin. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing. I feel like I know so much more about your whiskeys, and I'm so excited to follow you on Instagram and Twitter and follow your adventures leading up to St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
Tim, I've always found that one of the things that doesn't seem to be embraced here in the U.S. as much as it does in Ireland or across Europe is a great toast. And I wondered if maybe we could, of course, we want people to visit the Tullamore DEW website and follow you, Tullamore Tim, to get your adventures. But I don't know, I'm putting you on the spot, but do you have a great toast that we could both raise a glass to?
Well, we've great people, great whiskey, so let's do a great toast. This is a famous Irish one. Here's to cheating, stealing, fighting, and drinking. So stay poetic with this. This is if you cheat, may you cheat death. You steal, may you steal a heart. You fight, may you fight for one another. And if you drink, drink me. Launch it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Tim Herlihy from Tullamore DEW, thank you so much for coming on The Sipping Point, and I wish you luck with all your adventures.
Thank you very much. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and enjoy the season that is.
Cheers.